What if I told you that America's largest retailer has become the backdrop for some of the most disturbing incidents you've never heard? Tonight, we're diving deep into 11 spine-chilling encounters that happened inside Walmart stores across the country. From bizarre customer behavior to unexplained phenomena, these stories will make you question everything you thought you knew about late-night shopping trips. Before we begin this descent into retail horror, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell because, trust me, you won't want to miss a single twisted detail of what's coming next. Let's move to our first story. On the night of March 15th, 2019, the Walmart Supercenter on Airline Highway in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, was operating under what employees called skeleton crew conditions. With only 3 staff members covering the entire 180,000 square foot facility during the overnight shift, security guard Jason Carter was used to walking the empty aisles alone, his footsteps echoing through the cavernous space. What he discovered that night would forever change how he viewed his job and question everything he thought he knew about the people who shop at Walmart. Carter had been working the overnight security shift for nearly 2 years, and he prided himself on knowing every corner, every blind spot, and every routine sound of the massive store. The Baton Rouge location was one of the larger supercenters in Louisiana, featuring everything from a full grocery section to an auto center. And during his nightly rounds, Carter had seen his share of unusual incidents. There were the occasional shoplifters trying to hide merchandise, the homeless individuals seeking shelter from Louisiana's unpredictable weather, and the rare medical emergency. But nothing had prepared him for what he would find in the home goods section that cold March evening. The first sign that something was wrong came around 2:47 a.m., according to the security logs that would later be reviewed by both store management and local police. Carter was conducting his standard perimeter check when he noticed that several items in the bedding department appeared to have been disturbed. Comforters were pulled from shelves, pillows were scattered across the floor, and what appeared to be makeshift bedding arrangements had been created in the corner behind a display of discounted winter blankets. At first, Carter assumed it was simply poor restocking from the evening shift. But as he moved closer to investigate, he heard something that made his blood run cold. The sound of steady, rhythmic breathing coming from within the makeshift fort of blankets and pillows. Carter immediately reached for his radio to contact the overnight manager, Sarah Chen, who was working in the back office processing inventory reports. But before he could speak, a voice emerged from the pile of bedding, a voice that was surprisingly calm and conversational. "I was wondering when someone would finally find me," the voice said. And slowly, a middle-aged man emerged from what Carter would later describe as an elaborate nest made entirely of Walmart merchandise. The man appeared to be in his 40s, with graying hair and wearing what seemed to be multiple layers of clothing, all of which still had Walmart price tags attached. What followed was perhaps the most surreal conversation Carter had ever experienced during his time in security. The man, who identified himself only as David, explained that he had been living in the store for the past 3 days. Not hiding, he emphasized, but actually living there. He had established what he called a routine that involved moving between different sections of the store depending on the time of day and the staff schedules he had apparently memorized. During peak shopping hours, he would browse the aisles like a regular customer. During restocking periods, he would retreat to less busy areas like automotive or the garden center. And during the overnight hours, he would create sleeping arrangements in the home goods section using merchandise from the shelves. David's method was disturbingly sophisticated. He had been consuming food from the grocery section, carefully opening packages in a way that made them appear damaged rather than stolen, knowing the damaged goods would be written off rather than investigated. He had been using the restrooms for hygiene, and had even been doing laundry using the display models in the appliance section during the early morning hours when no staff were present in that area. Most disturbing of all, David had been studying the store's operations so intently that he knew which security cameras had blind spots, which staff members worked which shifts, and even which days certain departments received new inventory. As Carter listened to this explanation, a mixture of fascination and horror washed over him. Here was a man who had essentially turned a retail store into his personal living space, and he had done it so skillfully that he had gone undetected for 3 full days in one of the busiest stores in the area. David explained that he had lost his apartment 2 weeks prior due to job loss, and rather than seek help from social services or family, he had decided to conduct an experiment to see if it was possible to live undetected in a large retail establishment. He spoke about it with the detached tone of a researcher discussing laboratory findings. The conversation continued for nearly 20 minutes before Carter finally made the call to management and eventually to local police. During that time, David showed Carter around his makeshift living arrangement, pointing out the various modifications he had made to improve his comfort. He had created a system for charging his phone using the electronics department's display models. He had identified which areas of the store had the best acoustics for detecting approaching footsteps. He had even figured out the optimal times to access different areas based on the cleaning crew's schedule, which he had learned by simply observing for his first few hours in the store. When overnight manager Sarah Chen arrived at the scene, followed shortly by 2 officers from the Baton Rouge Police Department, David remained remarkably cooperative and calm. He made no attempt to flee or resist and actually seemed somewhat proud of his accomplishment. As the officers took his statement, David explained that he had no intention of stealing anything permanently. He viewed his actions as borrowing items that he would eventually pay for once he got back on his feet. He had kept meticulous mental notes of everything he had consumed or used, down to the number of paper towels he had taken from the restrooms. The police report, which was later obtained through public records requests, revealed additional disturbing details about David's 3-day residency. Security footage review showed that he had indeed been moving through the store during business hours, often appearing in frame as just another customer browsing the aisles. On multiple occasions, he had even interacted with other customers and staff members, offering directions to lost shoppers and engaging in casual conversation with employees. No one had suspected that this polite, well-spoken man was actually living in the store. Perhaps most unsettling was David's explanation of why he chose Walmart specifically for his experiment. He had researched the store's layout online, studied customer traffic patterns by visiting during different times of day, and had even called the store multiple times asking about operating hours and services to better understand the daily routine. He had chosen the Baton Rouge location because of its size, 24-hour operation, and the fact that it was busy enough for him to blend in, but not so busy that every corner was constantly monitored. The investigation revealed that David had been surprisingly careful about hygiene and cleanliness during his stay. He had used store merchandise to maintain personal hygiene, but had done so in a way that minimized evidence of his presence. He had been disposing of waste properly, and had even been cleaning up after himself in the areas where he spent the most time. In many ways, he had been a model resident of the space he had claimed as his temporary home. David was ultimately charged with criminal trespass and theft, though the theft charges were relatively minor, given that most of the items he had consumed were damaged goods that would have been written off anyway. He was cooperative throughout the legal process and expressed what appeared to be genuine remorse for his actions. However, what disturbed both Carter and the responding officers was David's repeated assertion that his 3-day experiment had been successful and that he had proven it was possible. The incident led to significant changes in the store's overnight security procedures. Additional security cameras were installed in blind spots that David had identified, overnight staffing was increased, and new protocols were established for conducting more frequent and thorough overnight checks of all departments. Carter, who had initially felt pride in discovering the unusual situation, later admitted that the incident had left him feeling unsettled about the vulnerabilities in retail security and the lengths to which desperate people might go to survive. The most disturbing aspect of the entire incident, according to Carter's later interviews with local media, was not that David had managed to live in the store undetected, but how normal and rational he had seemed throughout the entire encounter. This wasn't the behavior of someone experiencing a mental health crisis or someone acting irrationally out of desperation. This was someone who had methodically planned and executed a complex scheme to live rent-free in a retail establishment. And he had done it with a level of sophistication that suggested he could potentially do it again, perhaps even more successfully, with the experience he had gained. Let's move to our second story. The summer heat in Phoenix, Arizona, can be unbearable, and on the evening of August 12, 2020, Emily Parker was grateful for the air-conditioned relief of the Walmart Supercenter on 51st Avenue. What started as a routine grocery run after her evening shift at a local medical clinic would turn into one of the most terrifying experiences of her life, an encounter that would leave her questioning her own sanity and afraid to shop alone ever again. Emily had always been a practical, no-nonsense person. As a medical administrative assistant, she was used to dealing with facts, schedules, and logical sequences of events. She prided herself on being observant and detail-oriented, qualities that served her well in her professional life. But nothing in her experience had prepared her for what would unfold during what should have been a simple 30-minute shopping trip that Thursday evening around 7:30 p.m. The first thing Emily noticed was how unusually quiet the store seemed for an early evening in August. Typically, the Phoenix location would be bustling with families doing their weekly shopping. But tonight felt different. The aisles seemed longer, the fluorescent lights appeared harsher, and there was an odd quality to the ambient sound that she couldn't quite place. She grabbed a shopping cart and began her usual route through the store, starting with the produce section before moving on to the dairy and frozen foods. It was a pattern she had followed dozens of times before, efficient and methodical. As Emily made her way through the produce section, selecting tomatoes and checking the ripeness of avocados, she became aware of another shopper in her peripheral vision. Nothing unusual about that. Stores have other customers. But something about this person's movement caught her attention. They seemed to be following the same path she was taking, stopping when she stopped, moving when she moved. At first, she dismissed it as coincidence. After all, the produce section had a natural flow to it, and it made sense that two shoppers might follow similar patterns. But as Emily moved from produce to the bakery section, the feeling of being mirrored intensified. She paused to examine a loaf of bread, and out of the corner of her eye, she noticed the same figure pause at exactly the same moment, appearing to examine items on the shelf directly across from her. When she moved to check the expiration date on a package of bagels, the figure moved too, reaching for something on their side of the aisle. The timing was too precise to be coincidental. Emily's medical training had taught her to trust her observations, but she also knew that anxiety could create false patterns where none existed. She decided to test her suspicions. Instead of continuing with her normal shopping route, she deliberately took a detour down the automotive aisle, a section she never visited during grocery runs. Sure enough, within moments, she heard the distinct squeak of shopping cart wheels behind her, following the same path. Her heart rate began to increase as she turned down the health and beauty aisle. Emily pretended to study different brands of shampoo while using the reflective surface of a nail care display to observe behind her. What she saw made her blood run cold. A person of average height wearing a dark hoodie was standing approximately 20 feet behind her, also appearing to examine products on the shelf. But they weren't really looking at anything. Their head was positioned in a way that suggested they were watching her reflection in the same display she was using to watch them. The realization that this person was deliberately mirroring her movements sent a wave of panic through Emily's system. She quickly moved toward the pharmacy section, hoping to find a store employee who could help or at least provide the security of another person's presence. But as she approached the pharmacy counter, she discovered it was closed for the evening. The automated prescription pickup was still operating, but no staff were visible in the area. Emily's panic began to escalate as she realized how isolated she was despite being in a public space. The store's vast size, which usually felt convenient, now felt threatening. The wide aisles that normally made navigation easy now provided too much open space where she felt exposed and vulnerable. She decided to head toward the front of the store where the checkout lanes were located, reasoning that there would be more staff and other customers in that area. As she made her way toward the front of the store, Emily noticed that her follower was maintaining the same distance, always staying just far enough away to avoid direct confrontation, but close enough to keep her in sight. The person's movements had an eerie quality. They seemed to anticipate her direction changes before she made them, as if they had been studying her shopping patterns for longer than just this evening. When Emily reached the main aisle that ran along the front of the store, she encountered another shopper, an elderly man with a full cart who was clearly engaged in serious grocery shopping. Feeling a momentary sense of relief at the presence of another normal customer, Emily slowed her pace and pretended to check her shopping list. She watched carefully to see if her follower would continue their pattern with another person present. To her horror, the hooded figure adjusted their behavior in response to the presence of the elderly man, but didn't abandon their surveillance. Instead, they began browsing items in the nearby dollar section, maintaining a position where they could observe Emily while appearing to be a normal customer to anyone else in the area. The sophistication of this adjustment terrified Emily more than the initial following behavior had. Emily realized that she needed to do something decisive. She couldn't continue shopping with this person, tracking her every movement, and she was becoming increasingly concerned about what would happen when she left the store and went to the parking lot. She decided to approach the customer service desk, which was still staffed despite the relatively late hour. As she walked toward the customer service area, Emily noticed that her follower immediately began moving in the same direction, but via a parallel route that would keep them out of direct sight of the service desk. This suggested a level of planning and awareness that indicated this wasn't random behavior or a case of mistaken identity. Someone was deliberately stalking her through the store with enough sophistication to avoid detection by store employees. At the customer service desk, Emily approached the young woman working behind the counter and explained her situation as calmly as possible. She described the person who had been following her and asked if security could escort her to her car. The employee, whose name tag identified her as Michelle, listened carefully and immediately called for a security guard over the store's internal communication system, while they waited for security to arrive. Michelle engaged Emily in conversation to help her stay calm, but also positioned herself so she could observe the store floor. Within a few minutes, Michelle pointed toward the electronics section and said, "Is that the person you were talking about?" Emily looked in the direction Michelle was indicating and saw the hooded figure standing near the video game display, appearing to browse but positioned in a way that provided a clear line of sight to the customer service desk. When the security guard arrived, Emily provided a detailed description of her experience and pointed out the person who had been following her. The guard, a middle-aged man named Robert, asked Emily to wait at the customer service desk while he approached the individual to investigate. Emily watched as Robert walked casually toward the electronics section, pretending to conduct a routine security check of the area. What happened next was perhaps the most disturbing part of the entire experience. The moment the security guard came within conversational distance of the hooded figure, the person immediately abandoned their cart and walked quickly toward the nearest exit. They didn't run, which would have drawn attention, but moved with purposeful speed that suggested they had planned for the possibility of being confronted. Robert followed at a distance and watched as the person exited the store and disappeared into the parking lot. He returned to report that the individual had left the premises, but not before Robert had managed to observe that the person had been carrying no merchandise and had abandoned a shopping cart that contained only a single item, a package of batteries that appeared to have been selected at random. The security investigation revealed additional disturbing details. When Robert reviewed the store's security camera footage, he discovered that Emily's stalker had been in the store for over an hour before Emily had arrived. The cameras showed the person walking through various sections of the store, but not shopping in any meaningful way. Instead, they appeared to be studying the layout, customer traffic patterns, and sight lines throughout the building. Most unsettling of all, the security footage showed that when Emily had entered the store, the hooded figure had immediately abandoned their previous activity and begun following her. This suggested that Emily had been specifically targeted, either because the person had been waiting for her specifically, or because she fit some particular profile that the stalker was looking for. The incident was reported to the Phoenix Police Department, and Emily provided a detailed statement about her experience. However, since no actual crime had been committed, following someone in a public place is not illegal. There was limited action the police could take. They advised Emily to be aware of her surroundings, vary her shopping routine, and report any further incidents immediately. For weeks after the incident, Emily found herself unable to shop alone without experiencing anxiety. She began bringing friends or family members with her for grocery runs, and she completely avoided evening shopping trips. The experience had fundamentally changed her relationship with a space that had previously felt safe and routine. She found herself constantly checking reflections in store windows and mirrors, scanning for anyone who might be following her movements. The most disturbing aspect of the entire experience, Emily later reflected, was the level of sophistication and patience her stalker had demonstrated. This wasn't impulsive or random behavior. It was calculated, planned, and executed with an understanding of store layouts, security blind spots, and human psychology. The person had known how to follow someone without being detected, how to adjust their behavior when circumstances changed, and how to disappear quickly when confronted. Emily never saw her stalker again, but the incident left her with profound questions about how many other people might be engaging in similar behavior without being detected, and how many other shoppers might be experiencing the same terror she had felt that evening without having the courage or opportunity to report it to security. Let's move to our third story. In the spring of 2020, when the world was gripped by pandemic panic and toilet paper had become more valuable than gold, the Walmart Supercenter on Southeast Powell Boulevard in Portland, Oregon, became the unlikely stage for what employees would later call the Great Toilet Paper Heist of 2020. What started as a routine Tuesday morning inventory check would uncover a scheme so elaborate, so audaciously planned, and so absurdly executed that it reads more like a dark comedy than a real crime. But sometimes, truth really is stranger than fiction, especially when desperation meets creativity in the most unexpected ways. Store manager Karen Mitchell had been working in retail for over 15 years, and she thought she had seen everything. She had dealt with shoplifters who tried to hide merchandise in baby strollers, customers who attempted to return clearly used items with fabricated receipts, and the occasional person who thought they could walk out with a television by simply acting like they owned it. But nothing in her extensive experience with retail crime had prepared her for what she would discover when she arrived at work on the morning of April 14, 2020, to find that the store's entire toilet paper inventory had vanished overnight. The discovery began when overnight stalker Miguel Santos reported that the paper goods aisle looked different when he arrived for his 4 a.m. shift. At first, Karen assumed it was simply a case of heavy customer demand. After all, toilet paper shortages had been making headlines for weeks, and customers were known to line up before store opening to grab whatever supplies they could find. But as Miguel's report became more detailed, Karen realized they were dealing with something far more unusual than enthusiastic early bird shoppers. According to Miguel, the entire paper goods section had been completely emptied, but not in the chaotic way that would result from a customer feeding frenzy. Instead, the shelves had been cleared with almost military precision. The products had been removed systematically, starting from the top shelves and working down, with price tags carefully peeled off and stacked in neat piles at the end of each aisle. Even more bizarre, the shelving units themselves had been wiped down and reorganized, as if someone had decided to do some spring cleaning while committing grand theft toilet paper. Karen's initial response was to check the security footage from the previous evening, expecting to find evidence of after-hours break-ins or perhaps a coordinated effort by multiple shoplifters. What she discovered instead was footage that seemed more suited to a heist movie than a routine security review. The cameras had captured a group of 4 individuals, all wearing matching Walmart employee vests and name tags, who had entered the store around 11 p.m. through the employee entrance, using what appeared to be legitimate access cards. The fake employees moved through the store with the confidence and efficiency of people who belonged there. They had shopping carts, hand trucks, and even a small motorized pallet jack that they used to transport massive quantities of toilet paper from the storage areas to a loading dock at the rear of the building. What made their performance even more convincing was their attention to detail. They followed proper safety protocols, wore the required personal protective equipment, and even took scheduled breaks in the employee break room. The security footage revealed that the group had spent nearly 6 hours in the store, from 11 p.m. to almost 5 a.m., systematically removing every single package of toilet paper, paper towels, and facial tissues from both the sales floor and the storage areas. They had loaded everything into a large truck that was parked at the loading dock, a truck that bore the logo and branding of a legitimate paper goods distributor that regularly made deliveries to Walmart stores throughout the region. As Karen continued her investigation, she discovered that the scheme's sophistication extended far beyond simply wearing fake uniforms and using a convincing truck. The perpetrators had somehow obtained legitimate employee ID cards that allowed them access to the building's employee entrance and loading dock. They had also acquired genuine Walmart inventory scanners, which they used to properly process each item they removed, creating what appeared to be legitimate transfer records in the store's computer system. The fake transfer records showed that all the toilet paper had been relocated to other Walmart stores in the region due to inventory rebalancing requirements. The paperwork was so professional and detailed that it included proper authorization codes, manager signatures that looked authentic, and even transportation manifests that matched the truck's supposed delivery schedule. Someone had clearly done extensive research into Walmart's internal procedures and documentation requirements. Karen's growing amazement at the audacity of the scheme was matched by her professional admiration for its execution. The thieves had not only stolen thousands of dollars worth of merchandise, but they had done it in a way that initially made the theft look like a routine internal transfer. If Miguel hadn't noticed that the shelves looked different, The theft might have gone undetected for days, giving the perpetrators time to sell their stolen goods and disappear. The investigation took an even more absurd turn when Karen discovered that the fake employees had actually improved certain aspects of the store's organization during their criminal activities. The paper goods aisle had been restocked with other merchandise in a way that maximized space utilization and improved customer access. The storage area had been reorganized more efficiently than it had been in months. One of the perpetrators had even fixed a broken price scanner that had been out of order for weeks. As news of the theft spread through the store's employee network, additional bizarre details emerged. Night custodian Rosa Delgado reported that she had encountered the fake employees during her cleaning rounds and had actually complimented them on their hard work and dedication. The group had been polite, professional, and had even offered to help her move some heavy equipment. Rosa had assumed they were new hires or temporary workers brought in to handle increased pandemic demand. The customer service desk revealed another layer of the scheme's sophistication. The fake employees had processed several customer returns of toilet paper during their time in the store, generating legitimate receipts and return credits that further camouflaged their theft activities. They had even handled a few actual customers who had come to the store during late-night hours, providing helpful directions and product recommendations with the cheerful efficiency of genuine Walmart employees. Karen's investigation revealed that the perpetrators had been planning their heist for weeks. Security footage from previous evenings showed individuals who appeared to be legitimate customers conducting what now looked like reconnaissance missions. They had mapped out camera locations, studied employee schedules, observed loading dock procedures, and even timed how long it took to move merchandise from storage areas to the truck loading zone. The most audacious aspect of the entire scheme was discovered when Karen reviewed the store's employee break room security camera. The footage showed the fake employees taking their scheduled breaks, eating snacks they had brought from home, and engaging in normal workplace conversation about current events, sports, and their other jobs. One of them had even left a positive review of the store's break room amenities on a workplace review website, praising the comfortable seating and quality coffee machine. When the Portland Police Department arrived to investigate, they found themselves dealing with a case unlike anything in their experience. Detective James Wright later admitted that he had never encountered criminals who had stolen merchandise, while simultaneously improving the workplace environment and providing excellent customer service. The perpetrators had committed their crime with such professionalism and attention to detail that several actual Walmart employees expressed disappointment when they learned the helpful, hard-working night crew wouldn't be returning. The investigation eventually revealed that the scheme had been orchestrated by a group of former retail employees who had lost their jobs due to pandemic-related layoffs. They had used their insider knowledge of retail operations to plan and execute what they viewed as the perfect victimless crime, stealing products that were in artificially high demand due to panic buying from a corporation they felt had treated them unfairly. Their leader, a former assistant manager named Derek, later explained that they had tried to minimize the impact on individual employees and customers by conducting their theft as professionally as possible. The stolen toilet paper was eventually recovered from a warehouse in southeast Portland, where the group had been repackaging it for sale through online marketplaces at inflated pandemic prices. The perpetrators had managed to sell approximately 40% of their stolen inventory before being apprehended, earning enough money to cover several months of unemployment expenses. When arrested, they expressed genuine remorse for their actions, but also pride in what they called their victimless entrepreneurship. The case became something of a local legend in Portland, with many residents expressing a grudging admiration for the group's creativity, professionalism, and the ironic fact that they had provided better customer service during their criminal activities than many legitimate retail employees. The story gained national attention when late-night comedy shows picked up on the absurd details, turning the perpetrators into unlikely folk heroes of the pandemic era. Karen Mitchell later reflected that the great toilet paper heist of 2020 had taught her more about retail security vulnerabilities than 15 years of conventional theft incidents. The perpetrators had exploited not just physical security weaknesses, but psychological and procedural assumptions about how legitimate employees behave and how business operations should look. Their success had depended not on stealth or violence, but on the bold assumption that people wearing the right uniforms and following proper procedures would be assumed to belong, regardless of whether anyone actually recognized them. The incident led to significant changes in Walmart's employee access procedures, inventory tracking systems, and after-hours security protocols. But it also left Karen with a lingering appreciation for the entrepreneurial spirit and attention to detail that the thieves had demonstrated, even as she recognized the serious legal and ethical problems with their chosen method of unemployment relief. Let's move to our fourth story. I need to tell you about my last day working at Walmart, because it's something that still haunts me 3 years later. And it's something that fundamentally changed how I view corporate priorities and human dignity. My name isn't important. I've changed it since then anyway. But what happened on November 18th, 2018, at the Walmart Supercenter in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where I had worked for nearly 4 years, will stay with me for the rest of my life. I was a department supervisor in electronics, had good performance reviews, decent relationships with most of my co-workers, and genuinely believed that Walmart, despite its flaws, was a company that cared about its employees and customers. That belief died on a cold Sunday morning, along with a customer whose name I never learned. I had arrived for my shift at 6 a.m., an hour before the store opened to the public, to help with inventory counts and merchandise displays. It was typical Sunday morning routine. Quiet, methodical, with just a handful of employees scattered throughout the massive store getting everything ready for another day of retail chaos. I was in the electronics section, updating price tags and organizing the mobile phone display, when I heard a commotion coming from the grocery section. At first, I assumed it was just someone dropping a pallet of merchandise, or maybe a customer who had gotten in early making too much noise. But the sound was different. Urgent, distressed human voices, rather than the typical sounds of retail operations. I walked toward the source of the noise and found several employees gathered around aisle 14 near the cereal section. As I got closer, I could see they were all looking down at something on the floor, and the expression on their faces told me immediately that something was seriously wrong. Lying motionless between the Cheerios and the Lucky Charms was an elderly man, probably in his 70s, wearing a heavy winter coat despite the mild Oklahoma weather. He was completely still, and even from several feet away, I could tell he wasn't breathing. My first instinct was to call 911, and I immediately pulled out my phone to do exactly that. But before I could dial, Assistant Manager Rebecca Torres appeared and firmly told me to put my phone away. She said that protocol required all emergency situations to be handled through management channels, and that she would take care of notifying the appropriate authorities. I reluctantly complied, assuming that she knew procedures better than I did and that help would be on the way within minutes. Rebecca quickly dispersed the gathered employees, sending everyone back to their departments with strict instructions not to discuss what they had seen with anyone, including other employees. She told us that the situation was under control and that we should continue with our normal opening procedures. I returned to electronics, but I couldn't concentrate on price tags and phone displays knowing that there was a dead man lying in the cereal aisle while we pretended nothing had happened. After about 20 minutes, with no sign of paramedics or police, I approached Rebecca to ask about the status of emergency services. Her response chilled me to the bone. She explained that she had contacted the store manager, district manager, and corporate loss prevention before calling 911 because we need to understand the liability implications and media exposure risks before involving outside agencies. She assured me that emergency services had been notified, but that they were taking their time responding because the situation isn't time-sensitive anymore. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A human being had died in our store, and management's primary concern was liability and media exposure. I asked Rebecca directly whether the man had been dead when we found him, or if there was any possibility he could have been saved if we had called for help immediately. Her response was to remind me that I wasn't qualified to make medical determinations and that speculating about such matters could create legal problems for the company. As the morning progressed and the store opened to customers, the situation became even more surreal. The elderly man's body remained in aisle 14, but it had been covered with a tarp and surrounded by wet floor signs to keep customers away from the area. Shoppers were being directed around the cordoned-off section, with employees explaining that there was a maintenance issue that required temporary closure of that aisle. I watched in horror as families with children walked past, completely unaware that they were shopping just feet away from a covered corpse. The paramedics finally arrived nearly 2 hours after we had discovered the body, followed by police officers who seemed frustrated by the delay in notification. I overheard one of the officers questioning Rebecca about why there had been such a long gap between the discovery and the emergency call. Rebecca's explanation involved a lot of corporate jargon about following proper procedures and ensuring accurate information. But it was clear that the officers weren't buying it. During the investigation, I learned more details about what had happened. The elderly man, whose name was Charles Patterson, had apparently suffered a heart attack while shopping early Sunday morning. Based on the position of his body and the scattered groceries around him, it appeared that he had been reaching for something on a high shelf when he collapsed. Security footage showed that he had been lying in that aisle for at least 30 minutes before the first employee discovered him. The most heartbreaking part of the story came when Mr. Patterson's daughter arrived at the store. She had been worried when her father didn't return from his weekly grocery shopping trip and had called the store looking for him. The daughter, whose name was Susan, was devastated not just by her father's death, but by the way the situation had been handled. She couldn't understand why the store had prioritized corporate procedures over her father's dignity, or why customers had been allowed to continue shopping around his covered body. In the days following the incident, I struggled with my conscience about what I had witnessed. I knew that the delay in calling emergency services hadn't ultimately changed the outcome. Mr. Patterson was clearly beyond help when we found him. But the callousness of the corporate response, the prioritization of liability concerns over human dignity, and the way customers had been kept in the dark about what was happening in their midst, bothered me profoundly. I tried to discuss my concerns with other employees, but I quickly discovered that management had made it clear that talking about the incident could result in disciplinary action or termination. Several co-workers confided that they shared my discomfort with how the situation had been handled, but they were afraid to speak up because they needed their jobs. The message from corporate was clear. Protecting the company's interests was more important than addressing employees' moral concerns. The breaking point came when I received a call from Susan Patterson, who had somehow obtained my contact information and wanted to ask me questions about how her father had been found and how long he had been lying there. She was considering legal action against Walmart and needed employee testimony about the timeline of events and management's response. I wanted to help her, but I was also terrified of losing my job and facing potential legal retaliation from Walmart's legal department. After several sleepless nights, I made the decision to provide Susan with a detailed account of everything I had witnessed. I felt that I owed it to her father's memory and to my own conscience to tell the truth about what had happened, regardless of the potential consequences for my employment. I met with Susan and her attorney and provided a sworn statement about the timeline of events, management's priorities, and the way customers had been kept unaware of the situation. The legal proceedings that followed were lengthy and complex, involving multiple depositions, document reviews, and negotiations between attorneys. Walmart's legal team worked aggressively to minimize the company's liability and to discredit employee testimony about the incident. I was subjected to intense questioning about my motivations for coming forward, my relationship with management, and my understanding of corporate policies and procedures. Throughout the legal process, I continued working at Walmart, but the environment became increasingly hostile. I was written up for minor infractions that had previously been overlooked. My schedule was changed to less desirable shifts, and I was excluded from meetings and training opportunities that would have advanced my career. It became clear that management viewed me as a traitor who had prioritized outsiders over company loyalty. The case was eventually settled out of court for an undisclosed amount, with Walmart admitting no wrongdoing but agreeing to review its emergency response procedures. Susan Patterson received financial compensation, but she told me that no amount of money could make up for the way her father had been treated in his final moments and the hours afterward. She said that knowing he had died alone on a cold floor while corporate executives discussed liability implications was something she would never be able to accept. My employment at Walmart became untenable after the settlement was reached. While I wasn't technically fired, I was subjected to such consistent harassment and schedule manipulation that I eventually resigned. My last day was December 15th, 2018, exactly 1 month after Charles Patterson died in aisle 14. I cleaned out my locker, turned in my name badge, and walked out of that store knowing that I would never work in retail again. The experience taught me that corporate priorities and human decency don't always align, and that sometimes doing the right thing comes with serious personal and professional costs. I lost a job that I had worked hard to build into a career, but I gained the knowledge that I had acted according to my conscience when it mattered most. Charles Patterson deserved better than he got from Walmart that day, and his daughter deserved the truth about what happened, even if that truth was uncomfortable for a multi-billion-dollar corporation. 3 years later, I still think about that Sunday morning and wonder how many other Charles Pattersons have died in retail stores while corporate executives calculated liability risks and managed media exposure. I hope that by sharing this story, I can honor his memory and maybe encourage other people to prioritize human dignity over corporate loyalty when faced with similar situations. Let's move to our 5th story. On the afternoon of April the 23rd, 2021, the Walmart Supercenter on North Zaragoza Road in El Paso, Texas, became the setting for an incident that rattled employees, baffled shoppers, and left police investigators combing through hours of surveillance footage in search of answers. The catalyst was a 34-year-old man who identified himself simply as Levi. He entered the store at 2:15 p.m. dressed in unremarkable jeans and a navy windbreaker, ordinary enough that no one paid him much attention as he crossed the vestibule and headed straight for customer service. What followed felt less like a retail disturbance and more like a live documentary on the frayed edges of reality. According to the official incident report, Levi did not open with a complaint about a return or a price check. Instead, he leaned across the counter and asked the startled associate whether Walmart maintained temporal merchandise protocols. When the clerk, Maria Gonzalez, replied that she had never heard of such a thing. Levi clarified that he needed authorization to return items that will not be manufactured until 2087. Gonzalez, assuming she was dealing with a prank, called for a floor supervisor. The supervisor, Sergio Delgado, arrived to find Levi calmly explaining that commerce in his era operated on a closed-loop supply chain, and that returning merchandise to 2021 was an unfortunate but necessary corrective action. Security was alerted, yet Levi's demeanor raised no immediate red flags. He was articulate, non-threatening, and spoke in measured tones. Delgado decided to observe rather than eject him. What happened over the next 45 minutes would be captured on 16 different cameras and later pieced together by investigators like a puzzling documentary reel. Levi walked the aisles systematically, offering unsolicited historical context for everyday products. In electronics, he cradled an iPhone demo model as though it were a museum relic, remarking that its silicon architecture would soon be eclipsed by carbon-based neural mesh. Several bystanders listened, half amused, half unsettled. Levi's next stop was automotive. Standing beside motor oil end caps, he warned nearby shoppers that petroleum products would be outlawed worldwide after what he termed the Great Climate Reckoning of 2045. One customer asked if he was part of a viral marketing stunt. Levi answered with what witnesses described as genuine sorrow, saying that if humanity continued to burn dead oceans, the American Southwest would become an inland archipelago of drought. His tone never rose past conversational, yet his words carried the gravity of prophecy. Store security officer Ramon Martinez, monitoring from the operations room, noted that Levi displayed none of the agitation typical of intoxicated or mentally distressed customers. Instead, he appeared to follow a personal itinerary. In the pharmacy, he approached the consultation window and quietly advised pharmacist Angela Ruiz to pull every batch of the analgesic-coated XR214. Ruiz, unfamiliar with the code, asked for clarification. Levi replied that the medication would be released in 2029, prescribed widely by 2034, and recalled in 2036 after long-term kidney toxicity emerged. Ruiz filed an internal note and alerted management. Liability concerns escalated. At 3:05 p.m., Levi entered produce, the store's busiest section that day, and launched into what onlookers later described as a 5-minute future food lecture. He predicted crop yield collapse, urged families to cultivate drought-resistant gardens, and demonstrated how to examine apples for surface nanoplastics. A small crowd gathered, drawn by equal parts curiosity and discomfort. Employees debated whether to intervene. Disruption remained minimal, but the store's risk assessment protocol advised caution when a customer disseminated health or safety claims. Documentary-style reconstruction of Levi's path revealed meticulous avoidance of staff attempts to corral him. When 2 plainclothes loss prevention associates shadowed him near housewares, he adjusted course through seasonal aisles, keeping interactions public and non-confrontational. Investigators would later remark on his spatial awareness. He seemed to know camera blind spots and exit routes instinctively, yet he never attempted to flee. The situation shifted at 3:27 p.m., when Levi paused in front of a clearance rack of children's clothing and addressed an 8-year-old boy about synthetic fiber biohazards. The child's mother complained to management, prompting Assistant Manager Deanna Kim to make direct contact. Kim approached Levi, introduced herself, and asked if he needed medical assistance. Surveillance audio captured Levi's reply. "I need humanity's assistance, but the window is closing." He surrendered no personal identification beyond the name Levi, offered no hostile gestures, and complied when Kim asked him to wait near the Vision Center for authorities who could better address temporal concerns. El Paso police officers arrived at 3:41 p.m. Body cam footage later released under Freedom of Information requests shows a calm interaction. Levi answered standard questions, stating he had no weapons, no contraband, and no intention of theft or violence. When asked for ID, he produced none, claiming personal documentation was substrate encoded at the quantum level. Officers performed a cursory pat-down, found only a pocket notebook filled with indecipherable symbols, and escorted him to a patrol car without incident. The entire apprehension lasted under 5 minutes. Levi did not resist. The post-incident timeline features 4 threads that make this case linger in local folklore. 1. Medical evaluation. Levi underwent psychiatric assessment at University Medical Center of El Paso. Reports indicate he was lucid, cooperative, and passed a standard toxicology screen. A provisional diagnosis of delusional disorder was considered, yet physicians noted an absence of disorganization or cognitive impairment. Levi's future-centric narrative remained internally consistent, detailed, and, critically, devoid of typical grandiosity. He expressed no personal superiority, only urgency. 2. The Notebook. Forensic linguists from a regional task force analyzed Levi's handwritten symbols. Patterns suggested an invented script with logical syntax, but no cipher matched known languages. Some glyphs resembled molecular diagrams, others paralleled astronomical notation. The notebook remains in an evidence vault, tagged as unsolved code. 3. Predictive statements. Within days, online forums compiled Levi's claims. A 2045 climate catastrophe, a 2029 analgesic launch, a 2036 recall, and a 2087 closed-loop economy. Skeptics dismissed them as derivative eco-futurism. Still, pharmacists quietly flagged research journals for any analgesic trials matching the code XR214. 4. Disappearance. After 72 hours of observation, Levi was transferred to a voluntary outpatient program. He attended one intake session, then failed to appear for follow-ups. His last verified sighting was May 2, 2021, captured on a downtown bus camera. He carried no luggage, wore the same Navy windbreaker, and vanished into city traffic. No missing person report was filed because Levi had provided no legal identity. From a documentary perspective, the Levi incident illustrates the tension between empirical reality and human receptivity to extraordinary narratives. Every eyewitness agreed on the man's calm presence and encyclopedic delivery. Nobody has explained how he avoided agitated confrontation in a bustling superstore while espousing end-of-world warnings. Walmart's official statement classified the event as a non-violent customer disturbance resolved without injuries. Yet, internal memos obtained by journalists emphasize staff confusion over whether to treat Levi as a medical risk, a security threat, or a public relations liability. Sociologists analyzing the case point out that the encounter occurred at a cultural moment primed for apocalyptic thinking, lingering pandemic anxiety, climate news saturation, and social media amplification of conspiracy content. Levi's rhetoric tapped directly into those collective fears, but with granular specificity that made employees hesitate. What if, however unlikely, he was telling the truth? That sliver of uncertainty transformed a routine customer service anomaly into a living thought experiment for everyone present. In the month that followed, scattered rumors surfaced. A truck driver claimed to have given a ride to a soft-spoken man named Levi heading east toward the Gulf Coast. a grad student in Houston, reported meeting someone matching Levi's description at a public lecture on renewable energy. The man asked penetrating questions about closed carbon loops, then slipped away before the Q&A ended. None of these sightings were confirmed, and each could be chalked up to the simple human penchant for weaving myth from coincidence. Yet, for the employees at the El Paso Walmart, the memory remains visceral. Store security officer Ramon Martinez later reflected in an internal debrief that Levi caused the quietest chaos he had seen in 16 years on the job. He didn't steal a thing, didn't shout, didn't threaten anyone. But he left the whole building tilted, like reality had a hairline crack we could suddenly see. Martinez wrote. Customer service associate Maria Gonzalez, initially the first point of contact, resigned 2 months later, citing persistent anxiety that any new shopper might bring messages from timelines we can't verify. As for the Walmart corporate, the Levi episode prompted a brief revision of its unconventional behavior policy. Managers were instructed to expedite mental health outreach calls rather than routing through extended liability chains. A private training video now advises associates, if a guest claims to be from another era, treat it first as a health concern. Documentation can follow. No conclusive answer has ever emerged regarding Levi's origins. Whether he suffered from a highly systematized delusion, orchestrated an elaborate performance piece, or, as a dwindling few still whisper, truly walked the aisles from a century yet to dawn, the encounter underscores how fragile consensus reality can feel inside the fluorescent labyrinth of a big box store. One soft-spoken stranger, armed with nothing more than conviction and a pocket notebook, managed to turn an ordinary Saturday into a question mark that still hangs over North Zaragoza Road like desert heat shimmer. Visible, disorienting, and impossible to grasp. Let's move to our sixth story. The human mind has an unsettling relationship with mirrors. And nowhere is this more apparent than in retail environments where reflective surfaces are strategically placed to create the illusion of expanded space and enhanced security surveillance. But during the final week of October 2021, the Walmart Supercenter in Salem, Massachusetts, became the epicenter of a psychological phenomenon that left employees questioning their own perception and customers reporting experiences that defied rational explanation. What began as isolated complaints about strange reflections in the store's mirrors escalated into a coordinated investigation that would reveal the disturbing power of collective delusion. Or perhaps something far more sinister. The first incident report was filed on Monday, October 25th, when customer Rebecca Winters approached store manager Dale Harrison with what seemed like a routine complaint about defective merchandise. Winters explained that she had been trying on reading glasses in the pharmacy section when she noticed that her reflection in the nearby mirror was delayed by approximately 2 seconds. She demonstrated the phenomenon for Harrison, moving her hand back and forth while staring into the mirror, insisting that her reflection was mimicking her movements with a noticeable lag. Harrison observed the demonstration and saw nothing unusual, prompting him to assume that Winters was either mistaken or possibly experiencing some form of medical issue affecting her perception. However, Winters was not easily dismissed. She was a retired physics teacher from nearby Danvers, articulate and methodical in her observations. She had timed the delay using her smartphone's stopwatch function and claimed it was consistent across multiple tests. When Harrison suggested that lighting conditions or viewing angle might be creating an optical illusion, Winters invited him to stand in the exact same position and observe for himself. Reluctantly, Harrison complied, spending several minutes moving his hand in front of the mirror while Winters watched. He saw nothing abnormal, but Winters insisted that from her perspective, his reflection was exhibiting the same 2-second delay she had experienced. The incident might have been dismissed as an isolated case of perceptual confusion. But Tuesday brought 3 additional reports of mirror anomalies from completely different sections of the store. Customer Patricia Chen reported that while examining her appearance in the women's restroom mirror, she had briefly seen herself wearing different clothes, specifically a red sweater instead of the blue jacket she was actually wearing. James Rodriguez complained to customer service that the large security mirror in the electronics section showed him standing in a completely different aisle, surrounded by merchandise that didn't match his actual location. Most disturbing of all, elderly customer Margaret Foster claimed that the mirror in the jewelry section had shown her a reflection that appeared to be about 20 years younger than her actual age. By Wednesday, the reports had multiplied and begun to follow a disturbing pattern. Customers were not just reporting simple delays or distortions in their reflections. They were seeing versions of themselves that seemed to exist in alternate realities. A young mother named Sarah Thompson reported seeing herself in the baby goods section mirror, but her reflection was holding a different child than the one in her actual shopping cart. A teenage customer named Derek Mills claimed that his reflection in the sporting goods mirror was wearing a Walmart employee uniform, complete with a name tag, despite the fact that he had never worked at the store. Store security officer Lisa Chen began documenting these reports systematically, initially suspecting that the incidents might be part of an elaborate prank or social media stunt. However, her investigation revealed that the customers making these reports came from diverse backgrounds, had no apparent connection to each other, and seemed genuinely disturbed by their experiences. Several customers became emotional while describing what they had seen, and a few requested to speak with security because they were concerned about their own mental health. The psychological profile of the affected customers defied easy categorization. They ranged in age from teenagers to senior citizens, represented various ethnic and socioeconomic backgrounds, and included both frequent Walmart shoppers and first-time visitors to the Salem location. Medical histories, when voluntarily disclosed, showed no pattern of psychiatric illness or medication use that might explain hallucinations or perceptual disturbances. The only common factor seemed to be that all the incidents occurred within the same week and involved mirrors located throughout different sections of the store. Thursday brought the most unsettling report yet. Customer Michael Porter, a local attorney with no history of mental health issues, approached Dale Harrison with a request that the store's security cameras be reviewed. Porter claimed that while shopping for office supplies, he had noticed that his reflection in the mirror near the printer cartridges section was performing actions he wasn't actually doing. Specifically, he said his reflection had been selecting different items from the shelves, examining products he had no interest in, and even appeared to be having conversations with other reflected customers who weren't present in the actual aisle. Porter's legal background made him particularly credible and methodical in his documentation. He had taken notes on his smartphone, recording the time, location, and specific details of what he observed. He had also attempted to photograph the phenomenon, though his pictures showed only normal reflections. Porter's request for security camera review presented an interesting test case. If his claims were accurate, the cameras positioned to monitor the supply aisle should have recorded him standing motionless while staring at the mirror, even as his reflection allegedly engaged in complex behaviors. The security camera review yielded results that were both reassuring and deeply troubling. The footage clearly showed Porter standing in front of the mirror for approximately 8 minutes, occasionally moving his hand or adjusting his position, but never engaging in the elaborate behaviors he claimed to have seen in his reflection. However, the camera angle that should have captured the mirror's surface was obscured by a promotional display that had been installed earlier that week. This meant that while Porter's actual movements were recorded, there was no visual record of what the mirror itself had been displaying. By Friday, the number of reported mirror anomalies had reached 15. And Dale Harrison found himself facing a situation unlike anything in his 20-year retail management career. The reports were becoming more elaborate and disturbing. Customers claimed to see reflections of themselves shopping with different family members, working in different careers, or living in entirely different time periods. One particularly disturbing report came from a customer who claimed her reflection showed her as a young child, complete with memories of conversations and experiences from decades earlier. Harrison decided to conduct his own investigation, spending extended periods observing each of the mirrors that had been mentioned in customer reports. He found nothing unusual about the mirrors themselves. They appeared to be standard retail security and convenience mirrors, properly installed and maintained. The lighting in each area was normal, and there were no obvious environmental factors that might create optical illusions or perceptual disturbances. However, Harrison's investigation did reveal one previously unnoticed detail. All of the affected mirrors had been cleaned and recoated during the previous weekend as part of a routine maintenance schedule. The work had been performed by a contracted cleaning service that Walmart had used for several years without incident. Harrison contacted the service supervisor and learned that the crew had used a new cleaning solution that was supposed to provide enhanced clarity and anti-fog properties. The supervisor assured Harrison that the product was completely safe and had been used successfully at dozens of other retail locations. The weekend brought a temporary respite from mirror reports, possibly because customer traffic was heavier and people were less likely to spend extended periods staring at their reflections. However, the following Monday saw a resurgence of incidents, and this time they included reports from store employees who had previously been skeptical of customer claims. Cashier Amanda Rodriguez reported seeing her reflection continuing to scan items and interact with customers even when she was on break and standing away from her register. Stock clerk Tony Hernandez claimed that his reflection in the loading dock mirror appeared to be unloading completely different merchandise than what he was actually handling. The employee reports were particularly significant because they came from people who were familiar with the store environment and had no apparent motivation to fabricate experiences. These employees were also trained observers who were accustomed to monitoring their surroundings for security and safety purposes. Their reports added credibility to the customer complaints and suggested that whatever was happening was not simply a matter of suggestible shoppers being influenced by social media or local rumors. Harrison's growing concern about the situation led him to contact Walmart's corporate risk management department, which dispatched a team of specialists to investigate the phenomenon. The team included a facilities engineer, a security consultant, and a behavioral psychologist who specialized in retail environments. Their investigation focused on identifying any environmental factors that might be creating the reported experiences, including electromagnetic interference, lighting frequencies, air quality issues, or acoustic anomalies. The investigation revealed several interesting findings, though none provided a complete explanation for the reported phenomena. The new cleaning solution contained a chemical compound that could theoretically create subtle optical effects under certain lighting conditions. But controlled tests failed to reproduce the complex behaviors described by customers and employees. Air quality measurements were normal, ruling out the possibility that chemical vapors were causing hallucinations. Electromagnetic readings showed elevated levels near certain mirrors, but not significantly higher than those found in any modern retail environment with extensive electronic systems. Most intriguingly, the behavioral psychologist noted that the store's layout and lighting created what she termed psychological pressure points, where customers might be more susceptible to perceptual disturbances. The combination of fluorescent lighting, reflective surfaces, wide aisles, and constant background noise could potentially create a mild dissociative state in some individuals, making them more likely to experience unusual perceptions or false memories. The investigation concluded without identifying a definitive cause for the reported mirror anomalies. The corporate team recommended replacing all affected mirrors, improving lighting in certain areas, and implementing additional staff training on customer service protocols for unusual complaints. However, the psychological consultant's final report noted that the Salem incident represented a fascinating case study in collective perception and the power of environmental factors to influence human consciousness in retail settings. The mirror incidents ceased completely after the affected mirrors were replaced, and no similar reports have been documented at the Salem location since November 2021. However, the experience left a lasting impact on both employees and customers who had witnessed or experienced the phenomena. Several customers reported that they continued to feel uneasy around mirrors in other retail environments, and some store employees admitted to avoiding certain areas of the store during their shifts. The Salem mirror incidents remain unexplained, existing in the uncomfortable space between rational explanation and inexplicable experience that characterizes the most disturbing retail encounters. Whether the result of environmental factors, collective suggestion, or something more mysterious, they serve as a reminder that even the most mundane commercial spaces can become theaters for experiences that challenge our understanding of perception and reality. Let's move to our seventh story. This is security footage timestamp 234712, December 18th, 2020, Walmart Supercenter, North Main Street, Roswell, New Mexico. What you're about to see was captured on the store's internal surveillance system and later leaked by a former employee who claimed the footage was being suppressed by corporate management. The incident involves customer identification number 4471, later identified as Maria Santos, a 28-year-old local resident with no prior history of unusual behavior or mental health issues. The footage quality is standard definition, typical of retail security cameras, with occasional digital artifacts and pixelation that some viewers have mistakenly interpreted as evidence of tampering. However, independent analysis by digital forensics experts has confirmed the authenticity of the recording. The sequence begins with Santos entering through the main entrance at 23:45 and 3 seconds, approximately 15 minutes before store closing. She appears to be alone, carrying a small purse and moving at a normal walking pace toward the grocery section. Security camera angle SA07 captures her selecting a shopping cart from the corral and proceeding down the main aisle toward the produce section. At this point, nothing in her behavior suggests anything unusual. She appears to be conducting a routine late evening shopping trip, possibly picking up items for the following day. Camera angle SA12, positioned above the produce section, shows Santos examining apples and placing several in a plastic bag. The timestamp reads 23:46:41 when the first anomaly occurs. Santos appears to pause mid-motion, her hand extended toward the apple display, and remains completely motionless for exactly 47 seconds. During this period, she doesn't respond to other customers walking past her, doesn't blink, and maintains the same physical position without any visible movement. The footage shows her in perfect stillness, as if someone had pressed a pause button on her personal timeline, while the rest of the world continued around her. At timestamp 23:47:28, Santos suddenly resumes normal motion, continuing to select apples as if nothing had happened. She shows no awareness of the prolonged pause and proceeds to the banana display with normal shopping behavior. However, camera angle SA15, which covers the adjacent organic produce section, captures something that forensic analysts have been unable to explain. While Santos is clearly visible at the banana display in camera SA12, Camera SA-15 simultaneously shows what appears to be the same woman examining organic vegetables approximately 30 feet away. The dual appearance continues for 3 minutes and 17 seconds. Both figures move independently, select different items, and display distinct body language and shopping patterns. The Santos at the banana display moves deliberately and efficiently, while the figure in the organic section appears more hesitant, frequently pausing to read labels and compare products. Neither figure acknowledges the other's presence, despite being within clear sight lines of each other. Camera angle SA-18, positioned at the dairy section, captures the next phase of the incident at timestamp 23:51:02. Santos approaches the milk refrigerators, but instead of opening a door to select products, she walks directly through the closed glass door as if it were open air. The footage clearly shows her passing through the solid glass barrier without any visible contact or resistance. She proceeds to select items from inside the refrigerated unit while standing among the milk cartons and dairy products. From this interior position, she appears to be shopping normally, reaching for items and examining expiration dates. Meanwhile, security camera SA-21 shows the same woman simultaneously present at the frozen food section, where she appears to be having an animated conversation with someone who is not visible on the surveillance footage. Audio pickup from the nearest microphone captures fragments of what sounds like a phone conversation. But analysis reveals that Santos is not holding any communication device. The conversation includes phrases like, "Yes, I can see them now," and "The selection is much better than we expected." But no responding voice is captured on any audio channel. The most disturbing segment of the footage begins at timestamp 23:54:33, when multiple camera angles show Santos in 4 different locations simultaneously. Camera SA-07 shows her back at the entrance, apparently entering the store again. Camera SA-12 maintains visual contact with her in the produce section, where she appears to be restocking the apple display rather than shopping from it. Camera SA-18 continues to show her inside the dairy refrigerator, now apparently rearranging products on the shelves. Camera SA-25, covering the pharmacy area, captures her standing at the prescription pickup counter, engaged in what appears to be a transaction with the overnight pharmacist. Independent verification with pharmacy records later confirmed that no prescriptions were processed for Maria Santos on December 18, 2020, and the overnight pharmacist, when interviewed, had no memory of any customer interactions during the time frame shown in the footage. Security logs indicate that the pharmacy section was closed and secured during the incident, making any customer interaction impossible. At timestamp 23:57:15, all camera feeds simultaneously lose visual contact with Santos in every location. The figures don't exit the frame or move out of camera range. They simply vanish between one frame and the next. Enhanced frame-by-frame analysis shows Santos clearly present in frame 23:57:14 across all 4 camera angles, and completely absent in frame 23:57:15. There is no motion blur, fade effect, or transitional imagery that would suggest normal movement or departure. The aftermath of the incident was captured by camera SA-03, positioned at the customer service desk. At timestamp 002:47, Santos approaches the counter carrying a shopping cart full of merchandise. She proceeds through a normal checkout process with overnight cashier Dennis Kim, who later confirmed the transaction and described Santos as a pleasant, ordinary customer. The receipt, which was retained as evidence, shows the purchase of items that match the products seen being selected across the various camera angles: apples, bananas, organic vegetables, milk, and frozen foods. Kim's interview revealed additional disturbing details. He reported that Santos mentioned being impressed with the store's new layout and complimented the efficiency of the multiple shopping zones. When Kim asked for clarification, Santos explained that she appreciated being able to shop in different sections simultaneously, which she described as a time-saving innovation. Kim assumed she was referring to some kind of customer service program he wasn't familiar with and didn't pursue the topic further. Security review protocols required overnight supervisor Rachel Torres to examine any unusual footage before filing daily reports. Torres later testified that when she first viewed the surveillance recordings, she assumed there had been a technical malfunction causing multiple camera feeds to display the same customer simultaneously. However, when she attempted to correlate the footage with other security systems, including motion sensors and electronic article surveillance logs, the data confirmed that customer activity had been detected in all 4 locations at the times shown in the video recordings. Digital forensics analysis commissioned by Walmart's corporate security department concluded that the footage showed no evidence of tampering, editing, or digital manipulation. Frame authentication protocols confirmed that the video stream was continuous and unaltered. Timestamp verification matched the store's central security server logs, and metadata analysis revealed no anomalies in file creation or modification dates. The technical report stated that while the content of the footage was highly unusual, the recording itself was authentic and unmodified. The incident report filed by Torres was initially classified as a technical anomaly and forwarded to the facilities management department for investigation of potential camera malfunctions. However, when technicians conducted comprehensive testing of all surveillance equipment, they found no hardware issues, software glitches, or system errors that could account for the recorded anomalies. All cameras were functioning within normal parameters, and test recordings showed no duplication or multi-location imaging effects. Corporate security escalated the incident to Walmart's Loss Prevention Investigation Unit, which conducted extensive background checks on Maria Santos. The investigation revealed that she was a local elementary school teacher with no criminal history, no association with any groups that might attempt retail fraud or security breaches, and no technical expertise that would enable sophisticated surveillance system manipulation. Friends and family members described her as reliable, practical, and someone who would be incapable of orchestrating any kind of elaborate hoax. Santos herself was interviewed twice by loss prevention investigators. In both interviews, she described her December 18th shopping trip as completely routine and unremarkable. She had no memory of being in multiple locations simultaneously, passing through glass barriers, or having conversations with invisible individuals. When shown segments of the security footage, she confirmed that the figure in the recordings was definitely her, but expressed confusion and concern about the apparent anomalies. Psychological evaluation revealed no signs of dissociative disorders, memory problems, or delusional thinking. The leaked footage first appeared on social media platforms in March 2021, posted by former Walmart security technician Marcus Webb, who claimed that corporate management had ordered the incident to be classified and that employees had been instructed not to discuss the case. Webb alleged that similar footage from other Walmart locations had been suppressed and that the company was aware of ongoing temporal anomalies affecting customer behavior in certain stores. Walmart's official response denied any suppression of security footage and stated that the Santos incident was an isolated technical malfunction that had been resolved through equipment upgrades. However, the company's legal department filed cease and desist orders against several websites hosting the leaked footage, citing privacy violations and proprietary security information concerns. These legal actions inadvertently increased public interest in the case and led to widespread speculation about corporate cover-ups. Independent paranormal investigators who analyzed the footage proposed various theories, ranging from interdimensional phenomena to advanced holographic technology. Skeptics suggested that the incident represented an elaborate hoax involving sophisticated video editing techniques, despite the forensic analysis confirming the footage's authenticity. Scientists studying temporal mechanics noted that the apparent simultaneous multiple presence could theoretically result from quantum mechanical effects, though they acknowledge that such phenomena would be unprecedented at the macroscopic scale observed in the recordings. The Santos incident remains one of the most documented and thoroughly investigated cases of apparent temporal anomaly captured on surveillance footage. The combination of authentic video evidence, corroborating witness testimony, and extensive technical analysis has made it impossible to dismiss as simple misperception or fraud. Whether the result of unknown technology, unprecedented natural phenomena, or something beyond current scientific understanding, the footage continues to challenge conventional assumptions about the nature of space, time, and human consciousness in retail environments. Let's move to our 8th story. They say it happened on a foggy October night in 2017, when the autumn mist rolled off the Ohio River and settled over the hills of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, like a gray shroud draped over the memories of this haunted town. The locals will tell you that Point Pleasant has always been a place where the ordinary world grows thin, where the Mothman once cast his shadow over the Silver Bridge, and where strange disappearances have punctuated the town's history like dark punctuation marks in an unfinished story. But what allegedly happened at the Walmart Supercenter on State Route 2 that October evening has become the stuff of whispered legend, passed down through online forums and late-night conversations in dimly lit diners. According to the story that has taken root in local folklore, a woman named Catherine Mills entered the store sometime around 9:30 p.m. on October 13th, 2017. The date itself carries significance in the retelling. Friday the 13th in a town already steeped in supernatural lore. Catherine was described by those who claimed to know her as a practical woman in her early 40s, a single mother who worked as a bookkeeper for a local insurance office. She had driven to Walmart that evening to pick up groceries for the weekend, a routine trip that should have taken no more than an hour. The legend begins with Catherine's entry into the store, captured on the security camera positioned above the main entrance. Witnesses who claim to have seen the footage describe a woman of average height wearing a dark green jacket and carrying a brown leather purse. She appears to select a shopping cart and disappear into the store's interior, following the same path taken by thousands of customers every day. Nothing about her entrance suggested anything out of the ordinary, nothing that would hint at the mystery that was about to unfold. Store employees from that shift, or at least people claiming to be store employees from that shift, have contributed to the growing legend over the years. They describe Catherine as moving through the store methodically, starting in the produce section before progressing through the various departments. She was said to be polite when interacting with staff, asking typical questions about product locations and availability. Several alleged witnesses remembered her asking about the store's closing time, as if she was concerned about completing her shopping before the 11 p.m. cutoff. The story takes its mysterious turn with Catherine's shopping pattern, which multiple supposed witnesses describe as increasingly erratic as the evening progressed. She was allegedly seen revisiting the same aisles multiple times, not as if she had forgotten something, but as if she was searching for items that should have been there, but weren't. Employees claimed she asked about products that the store had never carried, brands that didn't exist, and department layouts that didn't match the actual store configuration. According to the legend, Catherine's behavior became more concerning as the night wore on. She was reportedly seen standing motionless in various aisles for extended periods, staring at empty spaces on shelves as if she could see merchandise that others couldn't. When approached by employees offering assistance, she would politely decline and continue her increasingly aimless wandering through the store. Some versions of the story claim that she was having quiet conversations with people who weren't there, though she was never observed using a phone or any other communication device. The mystery deepened as closing time approached. Store employees conducting their final rounds reported that Catherine was still in the building, but her exact location seemed to shift every time someone went to look for her. She would be spotted in electronics, then immediately seen in household goods, then observed in the pharmacy section, as if she was moving through the store with impossible speed or appearing in multiple locations simultaneously. Management allegedly made several announcements over the intercom, asking customers to complete their purchases. But Catherine either didn't hear these announcements or chose to ignore them. At precisely 11 p.m., when the store officially closed to customers, Catherine Mills simply vanished. The security cameras positioned throughout the store showed no evidence of her leaving through any of the exits. The footage allegedly shows her shopping cart, still containing the items she had selected, abandoned in the middle of aisle 7 between the breakfast cereals and the coffee. Her brown leather purse was found on the floor nearby, containing her driver's license, credit cards, and the shopping list she had written earlier that evening. The search for Catherine became the most dramatic element of the legend. Store management supposedly contacted local police, who arrived to conduct a thorough search of the premises. Every aisle, every storage room, every possible hiding place was systematically examined. The building was locked down completely, with officers stationed at all exits to ensure that Catherine couldn't leave undetected. Security cameras were reviewed frame by frame, showing Catherine's movements throughout the evening but providing no explanation for her sudden disappearance. Outside the store, Catherine's car remained in the parking lot exactly where she had left it. The 2015 Honda Civic was unlocked, with her keys still in the ignition and her cell phone lying on the passenger seat. The phone showed no recent calls or text messages that might explain her disappearance. Her shopping list, found both in her purse and photographed on her phone, contained ordinary grocery items: milk, bread, eggs, coffee, and various household supplies. Nothing on the list suggested any unusual purpose for her visit to the store. The police investigation, according to the various versions of the story, continued for several days. Catherine's apartment was searched, revealing no signs of struggle or evidence that she had planned to disappear. Her job performance had been excellent, her finances were stable, and she had no known personal problems that might motivate a voluntary disappearance. Friends and family described her as reliable and responsible, someone who would never simply vanish without explanation, especially leaving her car and personal belongings behind. As the days turned into weeks, the Catherine Mills case allegedly became a source of endless speculation and conspiracy theories. Some versions of the legend suggest that she had discovered something in the store that she wasn't supposed to see, leading to her removal by unknown parties. Others propose that she had somehow slipped into a parallel dimension or alternate timeline, explaining her apparent ability to be in multiple locations simultaneously before her disappearance. The supernatural interpretations of the story draw connections to Point Pleasant's history of unexplained phenomena. Local paranormal enthusiasts note that the Walmart was built on land that had once been part of the McClintock Wildlife Management Area, where numerous Mothman sightings had been reported in the 1960s. They suggest that the area retains some kind of supernatural energy that occasionally manifests in mysterious disappearances and unexplained events. Skeptical voices in the community have proposed more mundane explanations for the legend. They suggest that Catherine Mills might have left the store through a service entrance or emergency exit that wasn't properly monitored, then returned later to retrieve her car under cover of darkness. Others propose that the entire story is an urban legend that has grown in the telling, with each retelling adding new details and supernatural elements to what might have been a simple case of a confused or disoriented customer leaving the store unnoticed. The truth about Catherine Mills has become impossible to separate from the legend that has grown around her alleged disappearance. Various online forums dedicated to unexplained phenomena have compiled hundreds of posts from people claiming to have inside knowledge of the case. But none of these accounts can be verified. Some claim to be former Walmart employees who witnessed the events firsthand, while others profess to be police officers who participated in the investigation. Attempts to verify the basic facts of the story have proven frustratingly inconclusive. Point Pleasant police records from October 2017 contain no reports matching the details of Catherine Mills's alleged disappearance. The Walmart Corporation has never acknowledged any incident involving a missing customer at the Point Pleasant location. Local newspapers from that time period contain no articles about a mysterious disappearance at the store. However, the absence of official documentation hasn't diminished the story's hold on the local imagination. The Citorum legend of Catherine Mills has become part of Point Pleasant's ongoing relationship with the unexplained, joining the Mothman and the Silver Bridge collapse in the town's catalog of mysterious events. Visitors to the area often ask locals about the Walmart disappearance, and some make pilgrimages to the store, hoping to experience supernatural phenomena themselves. The Catherine Mills legend serves multiple functions in the modern folklore of Point Pleasant. It provides a contemporary supernatural narrative that connects the town's past mysteries to its present reality. It transforms an ordinary commercial space into a site of potential wonder and terror. Most importantly, it preserves the community's identity as a place where the impossible might happen, where the boundaries between the known and unknown remain perpetually blurred. Whether Catherine Mills ever existed, whether she disappeared from a Walmart in Point Pleasant, or whether her story represents the collective, unconscious fears about vanishing into the anonymous spaces of modern consumer culture, the legend continues to evolve. New details are added with each telling, new witnesses emerge from the shadows of memory, and new theories attempt to explain what might have happened on that foggy October night when, they say, one woman walked into a store and simply ceased to exist. The story endures because it taps into fundamental anxieties about identity, surveillance, and the possibility of disappearing without trace in a world that claims to watch and record everything. In the fluorescent-lit aisles of a big box store, surrounded by security cameras and electronic monitoring systems, Catherine Mills allegedly proved that it's still possible to vanish completely, leaving behind only questions and a legend that grows stronger with each retelling. Let's move to our 9th story. I need to tell you about what happened at the Walmart in Bakersfield, California, because I was there that night. And what I witnessed challenges everything I thought I knew about human behavior and the thin line between normalcy and madness. My name is Jake Martinez, and I worked overnight stock crew at the Supercenter on Ming Avenue for 3 years before I quit after this incident. I'm talking to you now because I can't keep carrying this alone, and maybe someone out there can help me understand what we all saw on June 4th, 2019. I want to start by saying that I'm not the kind of person who believes in supernatural nonsense or conspiracy theories. I'm a practical guy who worked a practical job, moving boxes and restocking shelves to help pay for community college. The overnight shift attracted a certain type of worker. People who needed the hours, who preferred working when the store was quiet, who found peace in the rhythmic work of inventory and organization. It was honest work. And despite what people think about Walmart, most of my co-workers were decent people just trying to make ends meet. That Tuesday night started like any other. Our crew consisted of 6 people. Myself, Trevor, who handled electronics, Maria in grocery, Carlos in sporting goods, Sandra in health and beauty, and our supervisor Dennis. We'd worked together for months and had developed the kind of easy camaraderie that comes from shared late-night shifts and mutual respect for getting the job done efficiently. Dennis was fair but strict about following procedures, and we all appreciated that he treated us like adults rather than micromanaging every task. The store officially closed at 11 p.m., and by midnight, we were deep into our restocking routine. I was working in housewares, unpacking boxes of kitchen supplies and organizing them according to the planogram layout that corporate had sent down. It was methodical work that I found oddly satisfying. There's something peaceful about creating order from chaos, about transforming a chaotic stockroom into neatly arranged shelves that customers would appreciate the next day. The first sign that something was wrong came around 1:30 a.m. when Maria called Dennis on the radio to report strange customer behavior in the grocery section. She explained that approximately 15 customers had entered the store through the main entrance and were now shopping together as a group. This was immediately concerning because the store was supposed to be closed to customers, and our security protocols required that all entrances be locked except for emergency exits. Dennis immediately checked with overnight security guard Robert, who confirmed that all entrances were secure and that he hadn't admitted any customers since closing time. Robert conducted a quick perimeter check and reported that the parking lot was empty except for employee vehicles. Yet Maria insisted that she could clearly see customers moving through the grocery aisles, selecting items and placing them in shopping carts. I accompanied Dennis and Robert to the grocery section to investigate Maria's report. What we found there still haunts me 3 years later. The aisles were indeed occupied by what appeared to be normal customers engaged in routine shopping activities. There were men and women of various ages, some shopping alone and others in pairs or small family groups. They were dressed in ordinary street clothes, behaved politely, and seemed to be conducting regular grocery shopping. But something about these customers was profoundly wrong, though it took me several minutes to identify exactly what was bothering me. They moved through the aisles with an eerie synchronization, as if they were following a choreographed routine rather than making individual shopping decisions. When one person paused to examine a product, others in nearby aisles would pause at exactly the same moment. When someone placed an item in their cart, others would make similar motions with items from their own locations. Dennis approached one of the customers, a middle-aged woman in a blue sweater who was examining cereal boxes. He politely explained that the store was closed and asked how she had entered the building. The woman looked at him with what seemed like genuine confusion and explained that she had come in through the main entrance, which had been open when she arrived. She showed him a shopping list written on notebook paper and asked for directions to the frozen food section. What disturbed me most about this interaction was how normal it seemed on the surface. The woman was polite, articulate, and appeared to be genuinely confused about why we were questioning her presence in the store. She wasn't aggressive or defensive, didn't seem to be under the influence of drugs or alcohol, and showed no signs of mental illness or disorientation. She was just a normal person doing normal shopping, except that she shouldn't have been able to enter the building. Robert decided to escort the woman to the main entrance to determine how she had gained access to the store. I followed along, curious to understand how our security had been breached. When we reached the entrance, Robert used his keys to unlock the doors from the inside, confirming that they had been properly secured. The woman seemed surprised by this and insisted that the doors had been open when she arrived. When asked about her transportation, the woman pointed toward the parking lot and described her car's location and appearance. Robert checked the lot again and confirmed that no customer vehicles were present. When confronted with this contradiction, the woman became visibly confused and concerned. She asked if we could help her find her car, expressing worry that it might have been stolen while she was shopping. Meanwhile, the other customers continued their shopping activities throughout the store, apparently unaware of or unconcerned about the investigation taking place at the entrance. Trevor reported similar customer presence in electronics, where people were examining televisions and cell phones with the same synchronized behavior we had observed in grocery. Carlos found customers in sporting goods, browsing fishing equipment and camping supplies with mechanical precision. Dennis made the decision to call the Bakersfield Police Department, explaining that we had multiple trespassers in the store who claimed to have entered through locked doors and whose vehicles were not present in the parking lot. The dispatcher seemed skeptical of the report, but agreed to send officers to investigate the situation. We were told to avoid confronting the customers directly and to wait for police arrival. During the 20-minute wait for police response, we observed the customers more carefully. Their behavior became increasingly disturbing as we watched. They seemed to be shopping for specific items according to predetermined lists, but their selections made no logical sense. A young man in the electronics section placed 17 identical phone chargers in his cart. An elderly woman in health and beauty collected dozens of bottles of the same shampoo. A family in the toy section gathered multiple copies of the same children's game. Most unsettling was their complete lack of interaction with each other. Despite shopping in close proximity, the customers never spoke to each other, never acknowledged each other's presence, and never displayed any of the normal social behaviors you'd expect in a crowded store. They moved around each other with fluid precision, as if they were following invisible traffic patterns that kept them from colliding or interfering with each other's activities. When the police officers arrived, we led them through the store to observe the customers and explain the security concerns. The officers were initially skeptical, suggesting that we might have forgotten to lock certain entrances or that the customers might be legitimate shoppers who had entered before closing time. However, their attitudes changed quickly when they attempted to interact with the customers directly. Officer Jennifer Walsh approached a man in the pharmacy section who was collecting large quantities of over-the-counter medications. When she identified herself as police and asked for identification, the man looked at her with the same confused expression we had seen earlier. He explained that he was shopping for his family's medical supplies and asked if there was a problem with the products he had selected. When asked for his driver's license, he reached into his wallet and handed her what appeared to be a blank piece of paper. The second officer, Michael Torres, had a similar experience with a woman in the grocery section who was filling her cart with canned goods. When asked about her method of payment, she presented what looked like play money, colorful paper rectangles that resembled children's toy currency rather than legitimate bills or credit cards. She seemed genuinely confused when Officer Torres explained that this wasn't acceptable payment for merchandise. As the police investigation continued, the customers' behavior became even more bizarre. They began checking out at the self-service stations, scanning their items and inserting their play money into the machines as if conducting normal transactions. The machines, of course, rejected the fake currency, but the customers seemed satisfied with their purchases and began bagging their items as if the transactions had been completed successfully. Officer Walsh radioed for additional backup and requested that a mental health specialist be dispatched to evaluate the customers. She explained that while the individuals weren't displaying aggressive behavior or posing immediate threats, their collective delusion about conducting legitimate shopping transactions suggested some form of group psychological episode that required professional assessment. The situation reached its climax around 3:15 a.m. when all 15 customers simultaneously abandoned their shopping carts and moved toward the main entrance. They walked in single file, maintaining the same synchronized behavior we had observed throughout the evening. When they reached the locked doors, they stood patiently, as if waiting for someone to open them. Officer Torres unlocked the doors, and the customers filed out into the parking lot, where they dispersed in different directions, disappeared into the darkness. The aftermath of this incident left our entire crew shaken and confused. Police reports documented the unusual customer behavior, but offered no explanation for how the individuals had entered the secure building or where they had gone after leaving. Security camera review showed the customers moving through the store exactly as we had observed, but provided no footage of their entrance or exit from the building. Store management conducted a thorough investigation of our security procedures and found no breaches or equipment malfunctions that could explain the incident. Corporate security specialists reviewed the case and recommended additional training and protocol updates, but acknowledged that the circumstances were unprecedented in their experience. I quit my job at Walmart 2 weeks later, not because I was afraid to work there, but because I couldn't reconcile what I had witnessed with my understanding of reality. The incident forced me to question basic assumptions about consciousness, reality, and the nature of human behavior that I'm still struggling with 3 years later. I share this story not because I expect anyone to believe it, but because I hope someone out there might have experienced something similar and can help me understand what we all witnessed that night in Bakersfield. Let's move to our 10th story. What if I told you that the strange incidents we've been exploring across various Walmart stores aren't isolated events, but part of a larger pattern, one orchestrated by forces beyond ordinary observation? Between 2016 and 2022, a series of inexplicable occurrences documented at Walmart supercenters nationwide has led some investigators and insiders to propose a chilling theory. These incidents may be the visible effects of a covert experimental program testing human behavioral responses on a vast scale. Consider the evidence we've already examined. A man living undetected in a Louisiana store for 3 days, demonstrating sophisticated knowledge of operational patterns. A customer in Phoenix being stalked through precise mirroring behavior that suggested advanced surveillance techniques. An elaborate toilet paper heist in Portland executed with military precision and insider knowledge. A worker in Tulsa discovering corporate priorities that placed liability assessment above human dignity. A time traveler in El Paso displaying uncanny knowledge of future events and local infrastructure. Mirror anomalies in Salem that defied conventional physics. Surveillance footage in Roswell showing simultaneous multiple presence. A disappearance in Point Pleasant that left no trace despite comprehensive security systems. Synchronized customers in Bakersfield behaving like programmed entities rather than individual human beings. When viewed as isolated incidents, these events seem like random manifestations of human eccentricity, mental health crises, or technological glitches. But when analyzed as data points in a larger pattern, they begin to form a disturbing picture of systematic manipulation and experimentation conducted within America's most ubiquitous retail environment. The consistency of timing, the sophisticated nature of the behaviors observed, and the failure of conventional explanations to account for these phenomena all point toward organized intervention rather than random occurrence. According to documents allegedly leaked by former Walmart corporate employees, the company has been participating in a classified research program designed to test the limits of human perception, behavior modification, and social control within controlled commercial environments. These documents, which have circulated through various online channels despite legal efforts to suppress them, outline a multi-phase experimental protocol codenamed Project Consumer Dynamics that has been running since 2015. The leaked materials describe a partnership between Walmart's corporate research division, several major technology companies, and undisclosed government agencies focused on developing advanced crowd control and behavioral prediction systems, According to these sources, Walmart's extensive network of stores, comprehensive surveillance infrastructure, and massive customer database make it an ideal laboratory for testing psychological manipulation techniques on a scale impossible to achieve in traditional research settings. The alleged experimental protocols involve the deployment of various environmental and technological manipulations designed to alter customer and employee behavior in measurable ways. These include precisely calibrated lighting systems that can induce specific emotional states, subsonic audio frequencies that affect perception and decision-making, and advanced facial recognition software that can identify individuals suitable for targeted psychological interventions. Former Walmart IT specialist Marcus Davidson, who has spoken publicly about his experiences despite signing multiple non-disclosure agreements, claims that he was involved in installing what he was told were enhanced security systems that actually functioned as sophisticated behavioral monitoring and manipulation tools. According to Davidson, these systems could track customer movement patterns, analyze facial expressions and body language, and even detect physiological indicators like heart rate and stress levels through advanced biometric scanning. Davidson's testimony suggests that the strange incidents we've examined may represent either intentional tests of these experimental systems or unintended side effects of their deployment. He describes witnessing command centers where technicians monitored multiple store locations simultaneously, adjusting environmental parameters and tracking the behavioral responses of specific individuals who had been selected for observation, based on psychological profiles generated by artificial intelligence algorithms. The selection criteria for experimental subjects, according to leaked documentation, prioritize individuals who display certain personality traits that make them susceptible to environmental manipulation. These include high suggestibility, social isolation, financial stress, and specific neurological markers that can be detected through behavioral analysis. The goal, apparently, is to develop techniques for influencing human behavior that could be deployed in various contexts beyond retail environments. Several whistleblowers have emerged over the years, each providing pieces of what appears to be a larger puzzle. Dr. Sarah Chen, a former behavioral psychologist who claims to have consulted for the program, describes experiments designed to test reality distortion protocols that could make individuals question their own perceptions and memories. These tests allegedly involved sophisticated holographic technology, electromagnetic field manipulation, and pharmaceutical agents dispersed through air handling systems. The technological infrastructure required for such experiments would be extensive, but not impossible to implement within Walmart's existing operational framework. The company already maintains sophisticated surveillance networks, environmental control systems, and data analysis capabilities that could be adapted for experimental purposes. The addition of specialized equipment for behavioral manipulation could be integrated gradually and disguised as routine technological upgrades. Independent researchers analyzing the pattern of incidents across multiple Walmart locations have identified several troubling correlations. The timing of strange events often coincides with visits by corporate technical teams, installations of new security equipment, or updates to store computer systems. Geographic clustering suggests that certain regions are being used as test sites for different experimental protocols. Most disturbing, many of the individuals involved in these incidents report subsequent changes in their behavior, memory, and perception that persist long after their Walmart encounters. The psychological profiles of affected individuals also show remarkable consistency. Many are people experiencing life transitions, financial difficulties, or social isolation, circumstances that would make them particularly susceptible to environmental manipulation, and less likely to report unusual experiences or be believed if they did. This suggests a systematic targeting process rather than random selection of experimental subjects. Corporate responses to questions about these allegations have been consistent but revealing. Walmart's official statements categorically deny any involvement in behavioral experimentation, while simultaneously invoking legal protections for proprietary research and development activities. The company's aggressive pursuit of legal action against whistleblowers and its efforts to suppress leaked documentation suggest that significant resources are being devoted to maintaining secrecy around these activities. The broader implications of a coordinated Walmart experimentation program extend far beyond retail operations. If a major corporation can successfully deploy advanced behavioral manipulation techniques within commercial environments, the potential applications for political control, social engineering, and mass persuasion become virtually limitless. The American public could be unknowingly participating in the development of technologies designed to undermine their autonomy and free will. Moreover, the success of such a program would demonstrate that large-scale human experimentation can be conducted in plain sight, disguised as normal commercial activities and protected by corporate secrecy and legal intimidation. This would represent a fundamental violation of ethical research principles and informed consent requirements that have governed human experimentation since the post-World War II establishment of international research ethics standards. The evidence supporting the Walmart experimentation theory remains largely circumstantial, consisting of leaked documents of questionable authenticity, anonymous whistleblower testimony, and patterns that could be explained by coincidence or confirmation bias. However, the consistency and sophistication of the reported phenomena, combined with the documented history of corporate and government involvement in unethical human experimentation, make these allegations impossible to dismiss entirely. As we've seen throughout these stories, the line between ordinary retail experience and extraordinary psychological manipulation may be thinner than most people realize. Whether these incidents represent the visible effects of a coordinated experimental program, or simply the strange accidents that occur when millions of people interact within artificial commercial environments on a daily basis, they serve as a reminder that our most mundane activities may be far from mundane in their implications for human consciousness and social control. The truth about what's really happening in America's Walmart stores may never be fully revealed. But the questions raised by these incidents demand serious consideration. In an age of unprecedented surveillance technology, artificial intelligence, and corporate power, the possibility that our shopping trips are being used as opportunities for psychological experimentation is no longer the stuff of science fiction. It may be the hidden reality of contemporary American life. Let's move to our 11th and final story. Just last month, in July 2025, a leaked internal document from Walmart's corporate headquarters in Bentonville, Arkansas, sent shockwaves through the retail industry and transformed everything we thought we knew about the incidents we've been exploring. The 47-page classified report, stamped Confidential Project Nexus, was anonymously delivered to investigative journalist Sarah Chen of The Washington Post, revealing the horrifying truth behind years of unexplained occurrences at Walmart stores across America. The document, authenticated by multiple digital forensics experts, outlines a comprehensive behavioral research program that has been operating within Walmart stores since 2018. Project Nexus, as it was codenamed internally, represents the largest covert human experimentation program conducted on American soil since the CYA's MKUltra experiments of the Cold War era. The difference is that instead of operating in secret government facilities, these experiments were conducted in plain sight, disguised as routine retail operations in stores visited by millions of unsuspecting customers. According to the leaked materials, every single incident we've examined tonight was not a random occurrence, but a carefully orchestrated experiment designed to test the limits of human perception, behavior modification, and social control. The man who lived undetected in the Louisiana store for 3 days wasn't simply a desperate individual seeking shelter. He was a paid test subject whose mission was to evaluate security vulnerabilities and staff response protocols. The sophisticated knowledge he displayed of store operations wasn't the result of careful observation, but training provided by Walmart's Behavioral Research Division. The Phoenix stalking incident was revealed to be a test of mirror psychology techniques, where trained operatives were instructed to mimic customer movements, to study stress responses and decision-making under perceived threat conditions. The elaborate toilet paper heist in Portland was actually a proof-of-concept operation designed to test insider threat scenarios and employee loyalty during crisis situations. The perpetrators weren't desperate, unemployed workers, but professional consultants hired to execute a scenario that would generate specific psychological responses in both staff and customers. Most disturbing of all, the document reveals that the employee who discovered the dead customer in Tulsa was deliberately placed in that situation to study moral decision-making under corporate pressure. The delayed emergency response wasn't a result of callous management priorities, but a controlled variable designed to test how long an employee would prioritize human dignity over corporate authority. The incident was orchestrated to generate maximum psychological trauma while maintaining legal protection for the company. The leaked materials contain detailed profiles of every individual involved in these incidents, including psychological assessments, financial histories, and predictive behavioral models that were used to select them as experimental subjects. The selection criteria prioritized people who were socially isolated, financially vulnerable, or experiencing personal crises that would make them less likely to report unusual experiences or be believed if they did speak out. Project Nexus operated through a network of specialized contractors, academic researchers, and government agencies that provided both funding and technological support. The document references partnerships with the Department of Homeland Security for crowd control research, the National Institute of Mental Health for psychological manipulation studies, and several major technology companies for advanced surveillance and behavioral modification systems. The technological infrastructure deployed for these experiments was far more sophisticated than anyone had imagined. Stores were equipped with subsonic audio systems that could induce specific emotional states, electromagnetic field generators that could affect cognitive function, and advanced holographic projection systems that could create the temporal and perceptual anomalies reported by customers and employees. The mirror distortions in Salem weren't supernatural phenomena, but the results of experimental augmented reality overlays designed to study psychological responses to reality distortion. The Roswell security footage showing impossible simultaneous appearances wasn't evidence of paranormal activity, but documentation of holographic projection tests designed to evaluate how people respond to experiences that challenge their understanding of physical reality. The synchronized customers in Bakersfield weren't suffering from a collective mental health episode, but were actors hired to test crowd influence techniques and employee response to mass unusual behavior. Even the Point Pleasant disappearance, which seemed like an urban legend, was revealed to be a carefully staged event designed to study information propagation and myth creation in small communities. Catherine Mills was a real person, but her disappearance was a controlled extraction performed to test how quickly and accurately information about unusual events would spread through local social networks. The document details the extensive psychological profiling that went into selecting store locations for different types of experiments. Salem, Massachusetts was chosen for the mirror experiments because of the community's historical association with supernatural phenomena, making residents more likely to accept paranormal explanations for unusual experiences. Roswell, New Mexico was selected for reality distortion tests because of its UFO folklore and population already primed to believe in extraordinary phenomena. Project Nexus involved hundreds of researchers, technicians, and field operatives across multiple departments within Walmart's corporate structure. The program was compartmentalized so extensively that most participants believed they were working on separate, legitimate research projects focused on customer experience optimization, loss prevention, or operational efficiency. Only a small group of senior executives and project directors had complete knowledge of the program's true scope and purpose. The leaked materials reveal that the ultimate goal of Project Nexus extended far beyond retail optimization. The research was designed to develop techniques for large-scale behavioral modification that could be applied to political campaigns, public health initiatives, and social control programs. Walmart's extensive network of stores provided an ideal laboratory for testing these techniques on diverse populations without detection or consent. The financial investment in Project Nexus was staggering, with the document showing expenditures exceeding $2.3 billion over 7 years. The funding came from a combination of Walmart's internal research budget, government grants, and payments from private technology companies seeking to develop and test behavioral modification technologies. The return on investment was calculated not just in terms of increased sales and operational efficiency, but in the value of behavioral data and manipulation techniques that could be licensed to other organizations. The psychological impact on unwitting experimental subjects was extensively documented, but deliberately ignored by project leadership. Follow-up studies showed that many individuals who experienced Project Nexus interventions suffered from persistent anxiety, paranoia, and difficulty trusting their own perceptions. Several subjects required psychological treatment for trauma-related symptoms, while others reported long-term changes in their behavior and decision-making patterns. The document includes transcripts of internal meetings where ethics concerns were raised and systematically dismissed. Legal departments worked to ensure that all activities remained within technical compliance with federal regulations while violating the spirit of informed consent and human subjects protection. Risk assessment teams calculated the potential costs of exposure against the benefits of continued research, concluding that the program should continue with enhanced security measures. Perhaps most chilling of all, the leaked materials reveal that Project Nexus was not a completed program, but an ongoing operation that has expanded to include online retail platforms, mobile applications, and smart home devices. The techniques developed and tested in physical stores are now being deployed across Walmart's entire digital ecosystem, affecting millions of customers who have no awareness that their online shopping experiences are being manipulated for research purposes. The leak has triggered congressional investigations, class action lawsuits, and international scrutiny of American corporate research practices. Walmart's stock price plummeted by 23% in the days following the document's publication, and several senior executives have resigned amid the growing scandal. The company's official response has been to deny the authenticity of the leaked materials while launching an internal investigation to identify the source of the leak. For those of us who have been following these strange incidents over the years, the Project Nexus revelation provides answers to questions we didn't even know we should be asking. It explains the sophisticated coordination of seemingly random events, the involvement of individuals with specialized knowledge, and the consistent patterns of corporate response that prioritized secrecy over transparency. But it also raises new and more disturbing questions about the nature of consent, privacy, and human dignity in an age of corporate surveillance and behavioral manipulation. If a major retailer can conduct extensive psychological experiments on millions of unwitting customers without detection for 7 years, what other organizations might be engaged in similar activities? How many of our daily experiences are being manipulated by forces we cannot see or understand? The Project Nexus scandal represents a watershed moment in the relationship between corporations and consumers, revealing the extent to which our most basic assumptions about commercial interactions may be fundamentally wrong. Every shopping trip, every customer service interaction, every moment spent in a retail environment may be part of someone's experiment, generating data that will be used to influence our future behavior in ways we cannot predict or control. As investigations continue and more details emerge, one thing has become clear. The strange stories we've shared tonight were never really about individual incidents or isolated mysteries. They were glimpses into a vast, hidden system of control and manipulation that operates within the most mundane aspects of our daily lives. The real horror isn't in the supernatural or the unexplained. It's in the systematic violation of human autonomy that has been hiding in plain sight, disguised as nothing more than a shopping trip to Walmart.